Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsay, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of SuperPsyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. SuperPsyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Raffi was his name. It comes from the Hebrew Raphael, which means God's healer. He was our family dog and the therapy dog who worked in my wife's and my practice. He worked pre-COVID in my practice and post-COVID in hers. On Saturday, when he was just a little over 9 years old and had spent 8 years with us as an American Kennel Club certified therapy dog, we learned from the vet that it was time to get ahead of suffering and to say goodbye to our dog. This was a really big moment for us, and the only comfort we got from it was that we knew that we could trust the medical doctor and that it was, in fact, time. The symptoms were consistent with that rendering of the verdict that we did not want to hear, but the verdict that we needed to hear. We made preparations for him to be euthanized at our home the following day. So what I'll be sharing with you is, a little bit about his death, the benefits of a therapy dog, who Raffi was as a form of a eulogy, and just talking a bit about pet loss and pet grief. I spent several years at the Humane Society as a volunteer leading pet loss groups, and I was mentored by one of the greats, Dr. Benny Carmack, who is a pioneer in pet loss and pet grief, which is one of the most profound forms of grief for anybody who's been through it. So first off, let's talk about the benefits of a therapy dog and what Raffi did. Raffi, like any well-trained, well-suited, certified therapy dog in a therapeutic setting, can increase the perception of safety by simply sitting there at the patient's foot or next to them on the couch if they want, or if they didn't want, he would just sit behind the couch and sit away from them. But by simply being present, he helped bring out their feel-good hormones that made them feel safer and more likely to share something that they might not have ordinarily shared. When I say the feel-good hormones, we're talking about oxytocin, we're talking about serotonin, dopamine, and others that allow a person to say those magic words in therapy of, I've never said this before, but I'm going to say it now. The healing power of the dog is very interesting because it's synergistic. Not only does the person who is receiving treatment receive benefits, but the dog, there seems to be some evidence that it's good for the dog as well. There's a synergistic experience of wellness that can transpire between dog and human in that moment. The people in my office who saw him or especially saw me, but also saw him, adored him. And they also confirmed that his presence did allow them to feel, if you'll allow for what sounds like a pun, to be shepherded into a space of sharing something that they might not have shared otherwise. Some people wouldn't just say, my gosh, I come to see you, but really, I'm just super stoked to see him. I did not take that as a diminishment of my therapeutic capacities. I really did appreciate how good his presence was in conjunction with my own. Raffi would regularly visit people in the hospital. There is evidence that having a dog present when a person is in a post-surgical state or in some type of illness, that they tend to recover quicker. There is such a preponderance of evidence that pets are good for us. There are just too many benefits to having a pet, including reduced loneliness, including increased socialization. I mean, the number of people my dogs have introduced me to in my neighborhood they've introduced me to a cast of characters because the research suggests, this is going to be a massive duh, but the research suggests that people are more likely to engage people with a dog than without a dog who are walking in their neighborhood. So by walking the dog, I met all kinds of neighbors, made friends, had all kinds of social benefits, in addition to the fact that I felt less alone when I was with him. At various times when I was going through my own sadnesses, just having him around was incredibly healing. But he did visit people in the hospital, and he loved visiting people in the hospital. And he always knew what to do with people in the hospital. He would jump on their bed, lay down next to them, and it was something out of a movie. They would just soften and melt and say, oh, this is maybe the best part of my recovery experience, just having Raffi with me. So who was Raffi and how did we get him? My wife and I typically agree on just about everything, but I really, really wanted a doodle. I've got curly hair. You may have noticed for seeing this video. And I wanted a dog who resembled that. And I've always felt a strong connection with curly dogs. And finally, I sold her on getting a doodle. We met this beautiful brown doodle named Barnabas. And she said to me, yeah, if you wanted that dog, I'd be super down. And fortunately, I had the breeder's information. I called the breeder. And she said, not only did she have a dog ready for us, but she had one from Barnabas's same litter. Barnabas was only 8 months old, and she'd been saving the specific dog for a therapist. My God, I mean, talk about kismet. So on getting my wife's consent, I said, yeah, he's ours. We'll buy him. And so we made the trek to get him. And it was one of the happiest days of my life, picking up Raffi. I mean, he was this teddy bear of a dog, just incredibly sweet, incredibly soft, temperament that was just so lovely and sensitive. He barked like 4 times a year. He was super mellow. He loved every person he saw. He loved every animal he saw. He was just pure joy. All he brought in his years with us, which were sadly too short by my standards, only 8 years out of his 9 years in total, he brought just joy every second. He had a distinct look. He just looked fuzzy. He felt fuzzy. And he knew when people were sad, and he would just zone right in and walk right to that person and give them what they needed. I can't think it was coincidental. He just did. And, even when I was saying goodbye to him and he was licking my tears, and he spent about 5 minutes licking my tears on Sunday before we said goodbye, he just knew to do that. Even in his fairly, impaired state, he was still delivering the goods as I was aiming to deliver the goods to him. There was, again, that symbiosis. One of the things that dogs can do is they provide a positive common denominator in the house. My children might have been into Fortnite and their video games and, various social influencers that I couldn't really relate to. And my wife and I might have been into other things, but for sure, all 4 of us could focus the same kind of love and affection on Raffi, and he became a positive common denominator. It's been said that since the advent of the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, kind of in a post-farm state, we used to all farm together, and we had a common denominator that was the farm. Well, our pets can be a positive common denominator, and that was absolutely the case in our home. He was a pure professional in the office, just nailed it every time, never was off his game, but at home, he was a dog. And when I say he was a dog, I mean, he could be a little mischievous. One of the things that he loved to do was to collect shoes from all over the house, and he would bring them to his bed. Now, if we had been more on our game, we would have found a way to train him out of this, but we did not invest the time to do it. It was kind of funny. And sometimes he would take our clothes as well, and his bed would be lined with as many as 10 shoes. I mean, it was like a collection. He was hilarious. He was definitely a shoe fan. But he also liked taking other garments. And sometimes not very often, but sometimes he would bite through them and maybe ruin them. But not once did I get angry. It was always just way too funny. So if I lost a shirt that might have been a shirt that I particularly liked, that might not have been cheap, I would always just kind of look at my wife and say, worth it. Like, sure, not the best behavior. And I get it. I'm probably not being the optimal doggy dad in terms of, rendering the hammer, but it was too funny and worth it. He just constantly gave me joy and laughter and mirth, and everything about him was comedy and adorability. And I mean, having 8 years of that nonstop was unbelievable. Now, there was one hiccup in the midst of our 8 years. He did get on the counter. He ate something fatty, and as a result, developed pancreatitis. And we thought he would die of that. Every time we get a call from the vet, it was just kind of like a doom and gloom call. Thankfully, my father, who's a great physician and a great healer in his own right, said, visit him as often as possible. So he had about a 2-week stay in critical care. And I would spend every minute that I wasn't working just sitting with him, oftentimes with additional family members. And in addition to all of the medical interventions that he received, I do believe that that was a healing element for him, just being with his people. I will also say that having pet insurance was very helpful. My buddy Paul, before I got Raffi, said, get pet insurance. And until that moment, every month when I was paying the premium, I was, kind of like resenting it. Like, here we go again, paying for something we probably will never need and hopefully will never need, except for the fact that we needed it. And not only did we need it, but we needed it at least twice, as you'll hear, because he did get out of that. And we got 3.5 more years. He suffered from kidney damage as a result of that pancreatitis and that acute and chronic pancreatitis that he had. But at one point, toward the middle of June of this year, he basically ruptured a disc in his back, and we had come to a fork in the road. The choice was either get surgery or hope that it heals on its own, where there would be a 50% chance, perhaps, that it would heal. And we opted for surgery, hoping, because we were told there was a 95% chance that he would be able to walk again. And as a result of him having the anesthesia and as a result of him coming into that surgery with a bad kidney situation, kidney disease, it's believed that that was kind of the beginning of the end. We would ultimately have just under 2 months more with him. Just a host of symptoms emerged that led to a reduced quality of life. I won't get all into that. But I will get into the grief aspect. Pet loss is no joke. You're not seeing it now as I'm sharing with you, but I have been crying every day, multiple times a day, and I don't expect it will stop anytime soon. Many people in pet loss groups would say to me, my God, I'm crying harder for the loss of my pet, and I feel guilty because, I have never cried this hard for anyone. And that's a common experience. Humans are our deepest connections in so many ways, but our pets can be too, particularly because pets generally don't leave us with any baggage. We humans tend to, provide each other with baggage. That's my best hypothesis as to why we might cry harder over a pet. The love is pure, unfiltered, and there's something so tragic because we're taking care of our pet. But as Carol Novella will say, that in Mutual Rescue, she wrote a book called Mutual Rescue, that when we rescue our pets often rescue us. There's this incredible, again, synergistic experience that we have with our pets. So this really, really hits hard. The other thing is that they can't speak to us, so we don't know what they're thinking. And we also have to do something that is so counterintuitive up until the moment of euthanasia, everything we've done for our pet has been focused on keeping them alive and thriving. And then we do a 180 and say, for the sake of you not suffering, I'm going to do something I've never done before. And that is call in a horrible, horrible intervention. And that is to end your life because it's the compassionate thing to do. It goes against every thought process we have. And so I've been stuck in a very limbic state, a very feely state. I've not been able, it's been really hard over the last few days for me to really tap in to reason, to my thoughts. It's been just pure mush and feeling and many irrational thoughts, including, my God, I let him down. Except for the fact that if you look at the video throughout the 8 years he was in our care, there's no way I let him down. And yet that erroneous thought creeps in. I let him down. I betrayed him. And I can say unequivocally, I have not betrayed my dog. I've taken excellent care of him. But I'm just letting you know that at least in my experience, those thoughts, those inaccurate thoughts can creep in during the grieving process, making the grief even harder. Thankfully, I actually gave a call to Betty Carmack, the aforementioned pet loss specialist, who trained me in how to basically run pet loss groups. Amazing woman, an author. She's the one who Nightline would call from ABC if they wanted somebody to weigh in on pet loss. And she gave me some of her time as a friend and a mentor. And it was so helpful. Talking to people who understand pet loss is crucial. There will be many people, unfortunately, who show up with not such great advice or not such great feedback. They may say, oh my gosh, he's in a better place now. No, he's not. My dog was meant to be in my place. But of course, the intention is good. But people are awkward with grief, and sometimes they say things that are a little bit off. Sometimes they'll try to give advice. Sometimes they'll say something that just feels off. And knowing who to turn to for the really good stuff, whether it's a therapist or a friend who really understands pet loss, that's a really big deal. I've noticed that it also, losing Raffi feels like I'm going to call it an ectomy procedure. You know how many procedures, surgical procedures, that result in something being cut away, like a laminectomy or various ectomies. They're not coming to me. Tonsillectomy, when you get your tonsils taken out. These are ectomies. These are procedures where a part of you is being removed. For me, at least, losing Raffi feels very much like an ectomy procedure. I feel like a part of me has been cut off and taken away. And yet, as Winston Churchill once said, never squander a good crisis. And pet loss is a crisis, to be sure. There's so much we can do to honor the relationship of our pet and to continue learning from the relationship we've had with our pet. One of the things I often ask people is, what did your pet teach you? And how can you honor that pet through what your pet taught you? One of the things that Raffi definitely taught me was mindfulness, like be more present. I have trouble with that. I'm a psychologist. I'm very present when people are in my room. But sometimes in my personal life, I can go to that little blue light known as a smartphone and be lured away from what's happening right in front of me. Sometimes I can feel in a rush and like everything is just a to-do list. Well, what about a to-be list? I know that sounds corny and maybe even cliche. But in my best moments with Raffi, we're just doing nothing. There's a term in Italian that I love particularly. It's la dolce far niente, which means the sweetness of doing nothing. And that's one of the things that we can do with our pets. We can experience the sweetness of doing nothing, just laying down, cuddling, wherever it might be, on a bed, under a tree, going for a walk with maybe no AirPods in, although I must say that generally when I went for walks, I was definitely listening to books. But when I was really on my game, I would just watch him and watch the way he trotted. He trotted like a horse. He didn't really walk like a dog. It was he had the funniest. I mean, just everything about him lent itself to comedy and just like maximizing cuteness. And I want to be able to be more present in my life, lest it run by me. One of the things I also believe is that we can grieve through art. I'm grieving right now, and I'm creating a piece of art in the form of this ode to my dog, a memorial to my therapy dog and my personal dog. Great art comes through grief. The Taj Mahal was created by a grieving husband. Great songs, great paintings have occurred. What kind of art would you like to tap into as you grieve your pet? How can you honor your pet? Maybe writing a eulogy. Maybe reading that eulogy to people who knew the dog. Maybe providing the people who knew the dog the opportunity to just say a little statement of their goodbye and have them all read. So many things we can do in the face of grief rather than just kind of stuff it. I highly recommend it. Another thing that we can do is get to know the anatomy of grief. One of the things I'm so grateful to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler. David Kessler is actually in one of my episodes. I think it's episode 26 of my podcast. But he and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with the 5 stages, now actually 6 stages of grief. They're not necessarily linear. They don't necessarily progress one at a time. You don't necessarily complete one as you move to the next one. You sometimes jump around, but they include everything from denial. Oh my God, this isn't happening. I keep saying, oh my God, Raffi, you cannot be gone. Anger. Oh my gosh. As irrational as it might sound, you may even be angry at your pet for going, for leaving you. You may feel abandoned, even though rationally you realize there's no way your dog or cat abandoned you, or any other animal for that matter. Bargaining, like what could I have done differently to keep this dog alive? That's the bargaining process, or, coulda, woulda, shoulda types thinking. Then might come, is depression. And again, not necessarily linear. These are just the way they're laid out according to the model. Sadness, hopelessness, maybe less joy in things that provided you with joy. And then acceptance. And then you may bounce back all over the place. And then the 6th stage, which David Kessler so kindly illustrated on my interview with him, is finding meaning after the loss. I think that's available to all of us at just about any time. And Raffi has been one of the most meaningful relationships I've ever had and always will be. Primacy and recency. Boy, these are really tough ideas. Okay, I'm going to tell you about our memories. The things that we tend to remember the most are the things that happen first and last. And we tend to overlook the in-between. So my first meeting with Raffi and my last experience with Raffi. And the last experience was crap. Saying goodbye was, and for the last few days, that's all I've been seeing. Is the last. But that does not dictate the 8 years that he and I shared together, and he and my family shared together. So in spite of the fact that I'm flooded with memories of how his last moments went and all of the sadness and just, for me, tragedy therein, it's my job to look at photos throughout his life and remember that the last few moments do not dictate the last nearly 3,000 days he and I spent together. The last day he and I spent together was really powerful and really sad, beautiful, and at moments awful. So it's primacy is the first memory, recency is the last memory. We tend to remember those most. Make it a point to lean in and drill into all of the stages and all of the memories that you can get through your photos, through stories, so that recency does not take over. Very, very important. And that's something that I'm working on. Some people believe that getting another pet at some point will be a betrayal. That's not been my experience. What you might see in the very far end, there's a little box that I'm pointing at. There's a little pine box in my windowsill, and that was the first major, maybe my second major loss of animal. But that was my cat, Yoda. And he was a real dear. And after I lost him, a lot of well-intended people gave me the advice of, well, just get another cat. I did not love that. And yet I went to volunteer at the Humane Society. And one of the last things they did was they showed me the cat cages. And I was only a month into my grief. I was definitely on paper not ready to get another cat. But there was this orange cat who was shoving his paw through the cage, screaming his eyes out. And I just asked the employee, can I pick up this cat? I think you know where this is going. Yeah, that cat and I would go home together. And while the cat was no replacement for Yoda, not by a long shot, it was good to have another relationship with another cat. Maybe even before I was ready, it was okay. It was good. Again, not a replacement. Each of them has their own spaces in my heart. But in some ways, it was an honoring of Yoda for me to have brought that cat home as I see it, because he had broken my heart open so much, Yoda. And I was previously not a cat fan. I am a convert. But Yoda was the first cat who I loved. And now I really love highly social cats. I'm not as crazy about the kind of skittish ones who hang out just under the sofa. But if they're relational and they're really going to be like into me and my family, I'm all in. And Max would serve that role brilliantly for my family. So I'm so grateful to have had him. Recommendations regarding euthanasia. Okay. If you decide to go through euthanasia, my own experience has been to do it at home has been better than to do it at a hospital. I've done both. And I definitely fall in the camp of do it at home. But here's what I would do when you're vetting your vet who is a euthanasia specialist. And that is find out if they do it in a ritualistic and slow manner, because it can be done too quickly. And it can be done without the vet getting to know the animal and without just kind of slowing things down. Now, you might be a person who actually wants it, like tear off the Band-Aid quick. I am not here to judge that. But if you're like me, for me, it would have been better to have it slow. And that is something that I will be aiming for in the future, is someone who really gets very ritualistic, very slow, and gets to know the animal, what the animal has meant, and does it in a very tender manner. That would be my recommendation. Vet them, find out if they do it in that way, if that's your style. If it's not your style, do it any way you wish. But one of the things that Betty Carmack also said is that if you're on the fence about whether or not to euthanize, she said that if you euthanize too early rather than too late, that tends to be better as well, because your last experience with the animal, them suffering, can really feel bad. Again, everyone has their own right to decide what they do. I'm just sharing my experience and what I've been told. And then there comes the fact that most businesses do not have a leave of absence for pet loss. Very often you have to go to work the day after. How to do that? I can't tell you what will work for you, but I can tell you what has worked for me. I definitely make it a point to grieve and cry at home, and to remind myself that when I'm at work and I'm focused on work, and I am focused on work when I'm at work, that when I get home, I get to fall apart. And for me, I get to contextually just absolutely cry like a baby when I get home. I have in the past made little kind of memorial stands with photos and collages and a candle. Those can be very helpful. And just to know that when I get home, I get to cry. And I also sometimes will ask the pet to please join me in a dream. Please show up. I'd love to see you. Lastly, in his last hours, we played really sad music to assist us in tears. I am one who believes that you need to feel it to heal it, that you need to let it out, that holding it in is not great. And that's just me. That's my belief. And there does seem to be some science to corroborate that. I found that using sad music while I was with him, beautiful, beautiful sad music, for me at least. And again, might not be your thing. I know people who would absolutely balk at that idea. But for me, that was the move. I wanted to have my feels. I wanted to hold him close. I wanted to feel my feels. It felt to me, at least, like it was an honoring of the paw print, the perma paw print he has left on my heart. So, folks, that is Raffi. He's been a member of the psychology community. He's done great service. He's assisted the healing in probably at least 100 people, if not more. And I'm so grateful to have had him. I know that when we sign up to get a new animal in our life, we're basically signing a contract that at some point, if things go as they're supposed to go and that the pet predeceases us, that there will be heartache. I'm aware of it. And I believe it's worth the cost. And I would pay it every time. I would pay it every time. Each of these pets has made me more open to life. And each of them have left a perma paw print on my heart. And that's my ode to Raffi, who I will always love. Thanks for listening. This is Dr. Adam Dorsay thanking you for listening to SuperPsyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.